Hi, today's video is going to be about assessment and three major concepts that are important to the start of understanding this. Assessment is evaluation. It's obtaining information and doing something with that. In psychology and in testing, we use tests of various sorts. Personality and intelligence or abilities tests are two of the main categories. And here are the three concepts. Let's suppose we think about this. Does your ability at writing or reading suddenly change? Were you reading at 8th grade level in middle school, and then 3 months later we give you a test of your reading ability, the same test, and you score at the 10th grade level, and 3 months later, even though you're still in 8th grade, you're scoring at the 5th grade level? Well, that's not consistent, and that's what we would call the reliability concept. Reliability means, does the test give consistent results? Most of the concepts that we're working with, we expect to be fairly stable and consistent so that they're not going to change over a short period of time. If you took an intelligence test and scored in the normal range, and you scored very high and then very low, back and forth within a short time, it generally doesn't change that much, so the test might not be considered very good. We need high reliability, consistency. Next concept, validity. Validity is totally different. This is accuracy. Does the test measure what we want to measure? If you've got a test that measures anxiety, we don't want to call it a measure of depression. Or as you can see down in the little bottom where it says alcohol. For example, there was a test called the MAST, Michigan Alcohol Screening Test, that some people thought was a very good test to use as a screening for alcohol problems. Let's say for drunk drivers who were forced to get an evaluation or chose to do that, or a diversion program. However, one of the big problems with this was it lacked validity. It didn't measure alcoholism very well. It had questions on it, such as true-false questions. Do you drink in the mornings? Have other people been concerned about your drinking? Have you had blackouts? Have you had legal problems? Etc. And many of these people would want to give a good impression because they didn't accept that they had an alcohol problem, or didn't want somebody else to know, because they did not want to be required to go to treatment programs, pay extra fines and fees. They just wanted their driver's licenses back. It's a fun group to work with, of course, and I did some of that in the past. So this test was poor with many kinds of validity. It really, you would get a low score on it, and it didn't necessarily mean that the person had no alcohol problem. That's two. What's the third one? The third major concept is called norms. Sometimes this is called standardization. Norms means what's a normal, typical, or average score on a test. So down here, 75. Okay, let's say your score is 75. Well, what does that mean? Is 75 good? Is 75 bad? You may be familiar with the concept that teachers often use as percentages, 75%, 75 out of 100. Well, that's a certain scale or grade in many classes. What's it if it was an intelligence test? 75 is fairly low. 75 if you were taking the SAT, incredibly low, very, very, very low. 75 on one of my short quizzes in my classes this term would be excellent, would be, you must have done some extra credit. That's an A+++ times the 14th power of some sort. So it's all relative. A score doesn't mean anything unless we know what's the typical average score in the group that we're being compared to. So if you're being compared to other students in class on a 12-point quiz, which is my typical short quiz, and the typical score was 9, but you scored 11, that's definitely above average. What if you scored 11 and everyone else in class scored a 12 and you were the only one with 11? This is very unusual, but that would mean you actually scored below average. So norms are important. We have to have something to compare it to. Otherwise, it's hard to interpret and make any sense out of these things. We will talk about some more concepts in psychological testing on other videos. See you then.